Jordan and I are twins, but our parents only like him. They don't care about me. My wife, Victoria, is the same. 3 years into our marriage, I still haven't won her heart. The day Jordan won some international award and made his high-profile return to the States was the same day I was officially appointed chairman of the board. My parents skipped my celebration dinner to rush to the airport to pick him up. Victoria showed her face for a minute, then left in a hurry. Watching them chatting happily in the family group chat, I let out a cold laugh and left the group. Then I emailed the divorce papers to Victoria. I was done pretending to be the deeply devoted husband. Now that I had what I wanted career-wise, there was no need to suffer any longer. I didn't expect Victoria to fight it tooth and nail. She actually said she loved me. After emailing the agreement, I sent Victoria a text. If you have objections, list them. If not, let's set a time to go to the courthouse. I assumed she was busy, but she replied instantly. It's over? Me, yeah. Victoria, where are you? I'm coming to pick you up. Still acting. I frowned, check the agreement. Victoria, what does this mean? Me, divorce agreement. Literally what it says. Victoria, why do you want a divorce? Me, I'm stepping aside for you too. Victoria, me and who? I typed out Jordan but deleted it. Whatever. I want a divorce. Victoria was silent for a few seconds. Send me your location. We need to talk face to face. I didn't really want to hash things out with Victoria right now. Today was my first day as CEO of the Montgomery Group. The celebration was held at the company's flagship 5-star hotel. It was a public announcement and a networking event rolled into one. After a long day, I was exhausted. I didn't even want to go home, so I just stayed in the hotel suite. Talk about divorce now. Everyone knew the second daughter of the Sterling family was a shark in sheep's clothing. Breathtakingly beautiful, meticulous, and a master manipulator. Even giving it my all, I could barely manage a draw against her. Fighting her right now would put me at a disadvantage. But if I didn't agree, she might think I was using divorce as a tactic because I was jealous. After sending the location, I opened a bottle of red wine and sat by the floor-to-ceiling window, drinking alone. I glanced down casually and saw Victoria's car pulling into the garage. It wasn't that I had great eyesight. That flashy, peacock blue Maybach was a birthday gift I'd hand-picked for her last year. It was completely outside her cold, minimalist aesthetic, but expensive enough that she couldn't complain. It was enough to express my deep love. Aside from her birthday, Victoria had never driven it. It was a surprise to see it today. I estimated the time it would take her to get upstairs, walked to the door, took a deep breath, and prepared for battle. But right when the doorbell should have rung, I got a text instead. It's too late tonight. Get some rest. We'll reschedule. She actually stood me up. I was so angry I wanted to curse, but reason held me back. I replied elegantly, okay. I assumed Victoria had changed her mind after seeing the agreement and realizing it was viable, deciding not to waste time. After all, I wasn't greedy. I only asked for 80% of the marital assets and 2 of the Sterling projects. Compared to regaining her freedom and rekindling an old flame with the man she loved, taking a hit to the wallet was nothing. That was until Jordan texted me right before I went to sleep. You asleep? Come hang out. The location was a trendy bar opened by some rich kid in our circle. I was about to reply that I was asleep. Then another photo came through. It was all familiar faces, mostly people from our circle, plus 2 of Jordan's male colleagues. My gaze locked onto the corner of the photo. Even with just half a back view, it was enough for me to recognize Victoria. The watch on her wrist was the New Year's gift I gave her the year before last. It cost less than $1 million, not in the same league as the $10 million watches her family collected. Its value was in the sentiment. I picked it myself, and the strap had our initials engraved on the inside. I scoffed out loud. I really had been flattering myself. Turns out, she was in a rush to attend Jordan's celebration party. My biological father, Mr. Winters, discovered I had left the group chat around noon the next day. Immediately, the phone call came. Ethan, what is wrong with you? His tone was accusatory. He didn't come in peace. Curved my lips. What's up? Why did you leave the group? Seeing me play dumb, Mr. Winter's anger ignited instantly. Even though I threw the phone on the desk, I could hear his roaring. Just because your mom and I didn't go to your party, you throw a tantrum and leave the group? Jordan came back yesterday. As his brother, you didn't show up. Mom and I aren't even mad at you, yet you're the one acting out? Ethan, you're 28, not 8. Can you be a little more mature? Act like a man? Classic Mr. Winters. Couldn't help but sneer. Even if I were 8, you'd tell me to yield to him. Shouldn't you? You're the older brother. You're the man of the house, right? Because I was the older brother. Because I was a man. From childhood to adulthood, I had to yield to Jordan. Whether it was things or people. Older by 5 minutes? I took a deep breath and said coldly, "Then you only have yourself to blame, Mr. Winters. You should have finished in a tissue back then. Without me, Jordan wouldn't need anyone to yield to him. He could have had everything. Enough. I have work to do." I hung up, and Mr. Winters' noise vanished. This was the first time I'd spoken so harshly to him, but I didn't feel much pleasure. Instead, I felt a hollow emptiness, like tinnitus ringing in my ears. I suddenly remembered when I was very young. Back when Grandpa took me into the Montgomery household to raise me, my parents would come to the estate to see me once a week. Every time they came, Mom would stand aside with no opinion of her own, while Dad would hold me tight, telling me how much he missed me and couldn't bear to be apart. He said he loved me most and would never ask me to yield to Jordan. But once I started school, Grandpa began praising me frequently and refused to add Jordan's name to his will. Mr. Winters started to lose his balance. For 5 whole years, aside from holidays, he never returned to the estate. Even if he did, he refused to speak to me, let alone hug or play. He vented all his dissatisfaction and resentment toward Grandpa on me. Later, when Grandpa passed away and I returned to them, he had long since completed his emotional withdrawal from me. He wouldn't smile at me. His face held only indifference and anger. He only constantly forced me to give things that belonged to me to Jordan. Not giving meant I was immature. Not giving meant I was unworthy of being a brother. Not giving meant the old man was blind to raise someone as selfish as you. I was only 10 then. No matter how tough I looked on the outside, I was still a child at heart. I was once gaslighted by him to the point of self-doubt. I hid under my covers and cried day and night over the unfairness. But suddenly one day, I just stopped being sad. Felt like passing a tribulation. Just like Mr. Winters, I withdrew from the father-son bond. After that, my heart was like a rock. I never got hurt again. Mr. Winters had played the role of the matrilocal son-in-law for years. Although he talked tough, saving face was more important than anything. No matter how angry he was, he wouldn't make a scene at the company. But he wasn't one to give up easily. I hung up on him, so he cried and fussed to make my mom apply pressure. Unlike Mr. Winters' aggressive dominance, the heiress Ms. Montgomery excelled at gentle moral kidnapping. "Ethan, have you eaten?" I glanced at my watch. 3 p.m. "Do you mean lunch or dinner?" Ms. Montgomery choked up a bit, then laughed dryly. "I heard from your dad that you're upset about yesterday. It was indeed thoughtless of Mom and Dad. You have every right to be angry. Come home tonight. Mom will make it up to you." This was the couple's favorite tactic. Call the dog home, then close the door and beat it. I had 100 reasons to refuse Ms. Montgomery, but I didn't. Some people push their luck for too long. It was time they understood the situation. I deliberately went back after dinner time. As soon as I walked in, I was met with Mr. Winters' furious face. "Do you have any concept of time? Dinner was at 6. You arrived at 7:30. I was very busy today." I scanned the room indifferently, feigning innocence. I told Mom not to wait for me. Just because you say don't wait doesn't mean we don't. Your brother just got back to the States. Family dinner means everyone must be present. Is that a rule? I laughed mockingly. If I recall correctly, I only come over once a month. When I'm not here, you guys just don't eat. You guys must have great constitutions. Ordinary people would be in a box by now if they did that. "Ethan, you came back specifically to piss me off," Mr. Winters shouted, slamming his teacup down heavily. As if he had suffered a massive injustice, his eyes turned red. With his outburst, Ms. Montgomery, who had been watching coldly, finally came to life. She pulled his arm to soothe him. Getting angry hurts your health. Why argue with a child? She looked up at me, her face full of disapproval. Ethan, how can you talk back to your father? Everything he does is for your own good. Apologize to your father, quickly. Jordan came down from upstairs too. Ethan's back? Perfect, I brought you a gift. His tone was cheerful, his face beaming. But when he got closer and saw Mr. Winters shaking with rage beside Ms. Montgomery, his expression froze. He looked at me disapprovingly. Ethan, did you make Dad angry? His expression and tone were identical to Ms. Montgomery's. I really wanted to laugh. I glanced at him sideways. How do you know it wasn't you who made him angry? Jordan's eyes went wide. How could it be me? I've been in my room upstairs the whole time. I've been in my office building the whole time. Further away than you. Jordan had to look at Ms. Montgomery. Mom, what happened just now? I didn't give the couple a chance to pin the blame on me. I spoke first. I came back today because Mom called me. She said what happened yesterday was uncalled for and she wanted to apologize to me in person. She insisted I come home. I didn't come back because I needed an apology. I was afraid if I didn't come, they'd think I was holding on to a grudge over a small matter. I was more afraid they'd hurt their health out of guilt. Did I explain that clearly? Mom? Ms. Montgomery's expression stiffened. Reluctant as she was, she could only nod. That's right. Yesterday was indeed thoughtless on our part. As soon as her voice fell, Jordan frowned at me and asked indignantly, So you're blaming me, Ethan? Mom and Dad missed your party because they were picking me up at the airport. If you want to think of it that way, sure. Jordan was silent for a few seconds. I apologize to you. If I had known you minded so much, I certainly wouldn't have let Mom and Dad come pick me up. No need. I was the star of the party. Whether other people came or not didn't matter. Mr. Winters didn't like the sound of that. He rushed over immediately. He asked ferociously, Ethan, what do you mean it didn't matter if we came or not? Make yourself clear. Literal meaning. My expression was bland. The more I knew what he wanted to hear, the less I would give him the satisfaction. Whether you came or not didn't affect the party or my mood. You, Mr. Winters was furious. He raised his hand to hit me but was stopped by Ms. Montgomery. Ms. Montgomery gave me a cold look. Ethan, what kind of talk is that? Are you saying your dad and I mean less to you than strangers? You always say we're biased. When will you be as obedient and sensible as Jordan so you don't make your dad angry or sad? This was Mr. Winters' favorite topic. He picked it up seamlessly. He's an ingrate. I must have committed sins in a past life to give birth to him. Heck, trying to gaslight me again. Too bad I stopped falling for that a long time ago. 'Cause comes before effect. It's not because I'm bad that you're biased. It's because you're biased that you think I'm not obedient or sensible. Mom, you better be clear about what you're saying. The $3 million in allowance you get every month is entirely because I'm the head of the group. If I were like Jordan, just playing piano and doing artsy social events every day, your income would be cut in half. You're not like auntie and uncle who have positions, shares, and dividends in the group. Seeing their usual guilt-tripping tactics fail, the couple's faces turned gloomy. Ms. Montgomery had been a leisurely heiress all her life. Her biggest fear was having no money, so she dared not lecture me further. Mr. Winters was different. It was in his nature to hit a brick wall and then go find another wall to hit. Even bloody and bruised, he'd struggle to the death. Ethan, are you this lawless at the Sterling house too? Don't forget, this marriage was supposed to be Jordan's. You schemed and stole it. Victoria is such a good woman. If you hadn't deliberately sabotaged it, she and Jordan would be a match made in heaven. If she knew about your calculated schemes, what do you think she'd do? What do you think she'd do? I stared at the raving Mr. Winters like I was looking at a ridiculous madman. I finished his sentence for him. She would fly into a rage and divorce me, and incidentally terminate all cooperation between the Sterling and Montgomery families. She would call me shameless, kick me out of the Sterling house, and ruin my reputation. She would also get back together with Jordan. Your son-in-law wouldn't change, you'd still be the father-in-law of the head of the Sterling family. Maybe because your favorite son is liked more by the daughter-in-law, you'd be even more comfortable and proud? I walked up to him, my gaze shifting between him and Jordan. I've already asked Victoria for a divorce. Since you guys are so confident, why don't you help throw some fuel on the fire? I'm tired of her as a pawn. Bored. I don't want her anymore. If you have the ability, make Victoria sign the divorce papers sooner. Don't hide like a turtle. What Ethan, throw away, I will absolutely never pick back up. I stared at Jordan while saying the last two sentences. Seeing his face turn white inch by inch, I knew I had guessed his thoughts perfectly. I was about to turn and leave when I saw Jordan's gaze suddenly become complicated. Shock, awkwardness, and a trace of barely concealed secret delight. Victoria. My heart skipped a beat. I turned my head and saw Victoria standing in the foyer, looking at us with a face like frost. Before Victoria could explode, I made an excuse about having business and turned to leave. Mr. Winters tried to grab me, but I shook him off. Ethan, if you walk out that door today, don't come back. How did I give birth to something with such a bad heart? If you had half of Jordan's kindness and gratitude, people wouldn't hate you so much. You, Mr. Winters' dramatic performance stalled because of my lack of reaction. Finally, he had to cover his face and start lamenting. While comforting him, Ms. Montgomery and Jordan both turned their spears on me. Ethan, just apologize. Stop upsetting your dad. Bro, Mom isn't as capable as you, she's not watertight. She might be thoughtless sometimes, but everything she does is for our own good. You're breaking her heart doing this. Victoria, hurry and talk some sense into him. This child is just stubborn. Victoria, stop my brother. I finally realized that when people are truly speechless, they really do want to roll their eyes. Ever since Grandpa passed away and I was brought back to them, scenes like this played out every other day. Mr. Winters would shake with rage because of me. Ms. Montgomery and Jordan, using filial piety as an excuse, would team up to force me to apologize. Not only were their expressions and tones identical, but their scripts were the same as they had been for years. Because it worked every time, they didn't bother changing it. Too bad I changed. Why should I apologize? What did I do wrong? Ignoring them, I walked faster. Passing by Victoria, she grabbed my wrist. She didn't speak. Her gaze was deep and controlled, carrying an oppressive feeling like she could see right through people. I didn't like it. I pulled away forcefully. What? CEO Sterling wants to stick up for someone? Since you're in a rush, just sign quickly so it's official. My sarcasm successfully made Victoria's expression change. But she was more patient than I imagined. She didn't get angry, didn't question me. Instead, she spoke with a certain righteousness. Ethan, you and I are husband and wife. We are one unit. Saying that, she pulled hard, blocking me behind her. Mom, Dad, Ethan and I are heading back. She dragged me away. The moment the door closed, I heard Mr. Winters' unwilling voice. Victoria is such a good woman. How did she get tricked by him? Victoria made her driver get out and dragged me into her car. Take me to the hotel. We need to talk. We spoke at the same time, and then the car fell into a weird silence. I knew what she wanted to talk about, but I didn't want to give her the satisfaction. No time. The divorce agreement. I have objections.
I glänzt sideways her.
What are you unsatisfied with? All of it. Stop being unreasonable. I think the agreement is very fair. You call 2080 fair?
Victoria is nered.
My understanding of fair is 50-50. Besides, you also want the Tech City project. I gave you less money, but you won the love. For 3 years, I loved you wholeheartedly. You didn't love me and couldn't return my deep affection, so you should compensate with money. Victoria seemed to laugh out of anger. You love me? Ethan, do you take me for deaf or stupid? Looks like she heard everything. I didn't flinch. Words said during a fight are just to upset the other person. They have no credibility. If I didn't like you, why would I have chased you all the way to America back then? Why would I have given you that plot of land in Munich? I remember you saying that even if I cheated, you wouldn't care. Is that what you call liking someone? Did I say that?
Impossible.
With my feelings for you, Victoria, let alone actually cheating, even if there was just a hint of it, I'd be heartbroken to death and drinking to drown my sorrows. You don't have a single honest word in your mouth. Victoria raised her voice, aggressive. She turned to glare at me like she wanted to bite me to death. But she held back, slapping the steering wheel hard instead. The horn blared abruptly, startling the driver waiting at the red light ahead into rolling down his window and cursing. Victoria stuck her head out and cursed right back. Maybe because her car was too expensive, the other driver, who had charged over wanting to fight, froze as soon as he touched the hood and retreated, cursing under his breath. Coward. Victoria cursed back and honked again. I stared, dumbfounded. The second daughter of the Sterling family was the model socialite, the ice queen, always disciplined and polite. I can't believe she'd argue with someone on the street, especially when she was slightly in the wrong. My stare was blunt. Once she calmed down, Victoria turned her head away uncomfortably. I'm in a bad mood today. We'll talk another day. I didn't know if it was my imagination. Her tone sounded strangely sheepish, like she'd done something wrong. With that, she made a U-turn at the intersection ahead and drove me back to the hotel. Victoria said I never spoke a word of truth, which was really accusing me wrongly. Almost everything I told her was the truth. You just had to take it with a grain of salt. The Sterling family started in infrastructure. Aside from traditional infrastructure, high-speed rail and wind power stations, the group's business covered real estate, logistics, energy, and entertainment. After Victoria took power, she implemented drastic reforms. She cut the declining real estate and entertainment businesses and marched aggressively into the tech and new energy sectors. She indeed had ability and courage. In just 3 years, she took Sterling Group to a new level. The year-end dividends were fat enough to make all the shareholders beam. But reform comes with regime change, and you can't do that without offending people. 4 years ago, Victoria reached long-term strategic partnerships with dozens of domestic and international car manufacturers. The sudden surge in orders overwhelmed Sterling's existing production lines. So Victoria decided to build bases in Munich, Detroit, and Datong, investing tens of billions annually in R&D and talent cultivation. She had a long-term vision. The success of the Detroit and Datong labs made her firmly believe Munich could be perfectly replicated. Who knew she'd get stabbed in the back by her own family? The project was stolen, and the situation reached a deadlock. The person who stole her project was me. With the Montgomery family's resources, naturally, we couldn't eat from the same pot as the Sterlings. Even if the Sterlings were willing to cooperate, we'd only get crumbs. The input and output were extremely unequal. But I went all in and fought for it. I grabbed it regardless of the consequences, because all I wanted was that project. At the time, the Montgomery and Sterling families were interested in a marriage alliance. The elders on both sides arranged a blind date to match Victoria with my cousin Marcus, my uncle's son. But both parties were unwilling, so the matter was dropped. Mr. Winters heard the news and threw a huge tantrum at home. He believed that an outstanding young talent like Victoria and his carefully raised Jordan were the true match made in heaven. Marcus refuses to be a proper young master and insists on being a war correspondent. He's not suitable for marriage anyway. The Montgomery family doesn't have only one boy. Our Jordan is smart and beautiful, gentle and sensible. Big families need a son-in-law like that to keep up appearances. Ms. Montgomery talked to Mom. Since Victoria doesn't like Marcus, why not match her with Jordan? I frowned listening to this. It was clearly mutual disinterest. So how did it become the woman being picky in Mr. Winters' mouth? Maybe my expression was too obvious. Mr. Winters immediately aimed his fire at me. Ethan, what's with that look? Am I wrong? He scoffed coldly. Maybe it's because you're too aggressive at the company and annoyed your grandmother and uncle, ruining Jordan's good match. You owe him this. Instead of watching the show, you better think about how to make it up to him. I don't know what method Mr. Winters used eventually, but he actually persuaded the Sterling family to arrange another blind date. And Victoria agreed to go. I remember the sun was gentle that day. I had an appointment at the same tea house. When I was leaving after discussing business, Past a semi-partitioned screen, Victoria's cold, breathtaking face suddenly burst into my view. She really had a perfect appearance. Especially when she smiled gently, her aggressive features softened, beautiful as a piece of fine jade. I involuntarily stopped, my mind going blank for a moment. It wasn't love at first sight. It was a kind of unwillingness and jealousy I didn't even want to face myself. I had known Victoria for a long time. We were in the same high school. She was 2 years older than me, a legend in the school. Whenever and wherever she appeared, she was surrounded by admirers like stars around the moon. But her nature was cold to both men and women. Not rude arrogance, but a strong sense of boundaries hidden under a cultured exterior that made it hard for anyone to cross the line. Unless Miss Sterling was willing, no one could take a step closer. I met her once in the music room. Many times we passed each other, but never once did I get a look back or a pause. She always kept a cold face, treating me like air. But that day, in her interaction with Jordan, I saw gentleness and patience on her face. She listened to him intently, completely unnoticed by my voyeuristic gaze. I suddenly remembered back home, when the three of them chatted, it was always harmonious. Mr. Winters and Ms. Montgomery would patiently listen to every word Jordan said, giving praise and affirmation. Unlike when they faced me, one impatient, the other perfunctory. The servants and I were just background boards for their display of warmth. In that moment, a strong hatred sprouted in me. I thought I must have Victoria, not out of like or love. It was because the status of Mr. Sterling could advance my career and help me take the position of group president. More importantly, if I married Victoria, I could thoroughly disgust them. So I went all in to steal that project. I wanted to use this stepping stone to make Victoria compromise. I wanted Victoria to beg me humbly. I wanted the person who only had eyes for Jordan to only have eyes for me. She was a pawn and also a victory medal. As long as I wore it every day, I could make life difficult for certain people. After successfully taking the project, I didn't actively seek out Victoria. People always cherish things they worked hard to get. If it's delivered to your door, no matter how good, it eventually becomes boring. Especially someone of her background, used to deception and intrigue, she would never believe a pie would fall from the sky. I wanted something from her, but I couldn't let her feel that I absolutely needed her. I subtly released rumors. Her assistant contacted me very quickly. I lied and said I was on a business trip abroad, then booked a flight back overnight to see her. The location was set at a private restaurant in the city center. The entrance was unassuming, but inside was a different world. Winding paths leading to secluded spots, zen rooms deep in flowers and trees. Everywhere was rustic, yet everywhere was luxurious. Even million-dollar Buddhist pine trees were placed casually by the path. The guests coming and going were all wealthy elites. No wonder that after opening for just a year, reservations were booked until the year after next. In this world, rich people don't eat food, they eat connections. Upper, middle, lower class clearly divided. The private room was elegantly decorated. When I arrived, Victoria had already ordered. These are all specialties. Mr. Montgomery should like them. I was a little surprised. During that time, I had studied all her information frantically. I read every interview at least twice. Everyone said Victoria was watertight in her dealings. This approach wasn't exactly polite, it seemed a bit dominant. The thought flashed by and I smiled first. CEO Sterling is thoughtful. It's only right. We'll be partners in the future. It's a bit early to say that. Implied meaning, I haven't agreed to cooperate yet. Victoria leaned forward slightly, her posture relaxed but elegant, her tone unquestionable. Except for Sterling Group, Mr. Montgomery won't find a better partner. So CEO Sterling wants to partner with me, rather than just wanting this land directly? To be precise, I want an equal exchange. Victoria's secretary handed over a contract. It was the project Montgomery Group had wanted for a long time but failed to negotiate. CEO Sterling is generous. In this case, Montgomery Group is taking advantage. The Sterling and Montgomery families have been friends for generations. Mutual benefit is only right. I looked up and met her eyes, making no secret of my ambition. CEO Sterling's proposal doesn't benefit me much personally. Surprise flashed in Victoria's eyes. She asked leisurely, "What else does Mr. Montgomery want?" "I heard Mr. Montgomery is currently fighting with the third master for operating rights of the group. This contract is enough to help Mr. Montgomery get what he wants. Besides, this is the price Mr. Montgomery gave to young Master Zhou of Honghai and President Li of Fuxing. Since we've known each other since childhood, it wouldn't be right to treat one better than the other." I looked at her, my gaze gentle. CEO Sterling knew me before? Who doesn't know the Montgomery twins? If anyone else said this, it would seem flippant. But paired with the cold silence under Victoria's icy exterior, it just remained a backhanded compliment. Sincere or not, it was all in a thought. A fire rose in my heart. I felt like she was specifically referring to Jordan. After all, at family banquets when we were kids, my parents would only bring him. It was normal for them to know each other. The twins' fame? I was just the tag along. I said, "I can give the project to CEO Sterling for free, as long as CEO Sterling agrees to one condition." "What condition?" "We get married." Victoria was so surprised she almost lost her composure. "I know you are seeing my brother, but dating isn't a commitment. If it doesn't fit, you can change. For CEO Sterling, I only accept this condition." Victoria pondered for a moment. "Why?" I looked into her deep, cold black eyes. My face flushed slightly, but I was extremely frank. "Because I like you." The shock on Victoria's face vanished instantly, her gaze cold and sharp as a blade. Her nobility couldn't suppress her hidden anger. "Apologies. Forgive my abruptness." I pressed my lips together tight, feigning calm. "But I do like CEO Sterling. Looking at all of New York, only you can help me get what I want." This was hinting to her that I liked her status. The wariness in Victoria's eyes didn't decrease, but the anger dissipated by half. She lifted her chin at me. "What do you want?" My palms were sweating lightly. I was glad I bet correctly. Victoria had been in power for years. Beautiful and rich, who knows how many men in this world admired her. Whether for money, power, or her person, she was probably immune. With her upbringing, even if she didn't like it, she would give basic respect when rejecting. But discussing feelings during a negotiation is easy to make people disgusted. I met her by chance, why should I be an exception? But this move was to test that exception. If she was indifferent, it meant she had zero interest in me. If there was an emotional fluctuation, disappointment, disdain, it proved my proposal was worth her consideration. Someone like her wouldn't allow herself to have a stupid, unpresentable husband. Only those who see the opportunity first have a chance to win big with a small bet. The position of president of Montgomery Group. I looked up at her, my eyes holding just the right amount of ambition and sincerity. I know CEO Sterling has many choices. Compared to a trophy husband who only looks good, a durable and practical partner like me is more suitable. I have ability, CEO Sterling has boldness. Except for the title and connections, I don't need love or emotional value. I'm more suitable to stand by your side. With every sentence I spoke, the scrutiny in Victoria's eyes increased. She didn't trust me, but she had navigated the fame and fortune field for years and knew best how to weigh pros and cons. After a long time, she finally nodded. "Fine. But I also have conditions. CEO Sterling, go ahead. Whether there is love or not, marriage is a binding covenant. I will not allow betrayal. Past relationships, please clear them up, Mr. Montgomery. Does this rule apply to CEO Sterling as well?" "Of course. Deal." I curled my lips and looked at her expectantly. Then, regarding the elders on both sides, please think of a story, CEO Sterling. Cutting ties with Jordan wasn't hard for Victoria. After that meeting at the tea house, nothing happened between them. They didn't even exchange personal WeChats. According to the servants at home, Mr. Winters was furious about this. He was either personally teaching Jordan pickup artist techniques, encouraging him to attack actively, or frequently meeting with the ladies in the circle, fishing for information indirectly and spreading rumors. In his mouth, Victoria had a good impression of Jordan and was considerate during their chats and dates. It was just that before I sought out Victoria, she seemed not to care. didn't respond, didn't refute. But after I sought her out, she actively asked me out for dinner twice, saw an art exhibition and a musical. Soon, her aunt asked Mr. Winters personally at a banquet, "Is Ethan back from his business trip? Our old lady has mentioned several times that she wants to see her grandson-in-law." Mr. Winters didn't react for a moment, only caring about belittling me. "He's busy all day and never home. I haven't seen him in ages." Unlike Jordan, who stays by my side every day, filial and sensible, Victoria's aunt smiled without warmth. "Ethan is the vice president. If he wasn't busy, your Montgomery group should be worried." Mr. Winters realized he said something he shouldn't have. After all, no wealthy family would publicly belittle their own. Mr. Winters laughed dryly to cover up. "Look at my temper, I'm just concerned. Why does a boy tire himself out like that? Better to start a family early and support his wife." Victoria's aunt, "Our old lady thinks so too. She asked Victoria, and she also wants to marry Ethan soon, but Ethan hasn't agreed yet. How about you put in a good word, Mr. Winters?" Hearing this, Mr. Winters' face finally changed, stumbling over his words. "What? How is Victoria with Ethan?" "She's with our Jordan. Our Sterling family has always intended for the Montgomery young master. It's rare that the two children have fate. Mr. Winters, don't decline." Victoria's aunt's sentence was practically a slap in Mr. Winters' face in public, dizzying him. Right? Sterling-Montgomery alliance. How could she marry someone named Winters? Jordan took his father's surname. Mr. Winters still wanted to come up with a countermeasure. Two other ladies also spoke up. "CEO Sterling and Mr. Montgomery are truly a match. I went to a concert the other day and saw them. Oh my, so sweet together. As they say, a talented man and a beautiful woman. A match made in heaven. No wonder old Lady Montgomery is anxious." Only then did Victoria's aunt take Mr. Winters' hand. "Mr. Winters really knows how to raise children. Raising such an outstanding son is our Sterling family's gain. Don't worry. When Ethan marries in, our Sterling family will treat him well." At this point, Mr. Winters could only swallow his teeth and blood no matter how unwilling he was. After returning home from the banquet, he first smashed up a room, then cried bitterly, asking Ms. Montgomery to call me back in the name of illness. Ms. Montgomery's guilt trip failed, so she came to the company to find me herself, only to find that I was truly on a business trip. She was also severely scolded by my uncle for being incompetent and unable to manage her household. Ms. Montgomery couldn't help but lose her temper at home. In his agitation, Mr. Winters actually ended up in the hospital. By the time he was discharged, the circle was full of rumors about his wishful thinking and attempt to switch sons for the marriage. Thus, the joke about Mr. Winters entering the house on the front foot and being taken away by the ambulance on the back foot was born. It was on the eve of the wedding that I casually mentioned this to Victoria. How did CEO Sterling convince Mrs. Sterling to lie? The first madam of the Sterling family, Song Lon, was a history professor renowned internationally, famous for her integrity. Victoria sat opposite me, her exquisite features so good-looking they made one salivate. "We've already registered. You should change how you address me." Her expressionless look was full of abstinence, making one inexplicably generate a strong desire to play with her. I coughed lightly to cover up. "What do you want me to call you? What do you want to call me? Wifey? Baby?" I said frivolous words with a straight face, unable to help but cringe. "Forget those two." I said, "I'll call you whatever you call me." Victoria was silent for 2 seconds. "Ethan."
Victoria.
I nodded. "Looks like you're as normal as I am." Victoria looked at me for a long time. She didn't lie. The Sterling family always intended for the second young master of the Montgomery family. No matter how dissatisfied Mr. Winters was with my marriage, I got my wish and united with the Sterling family. The wedding was grand and luxurious, gathering celebrities. Although Victoria didn't love me, she gave me the best. Known as a workaholic, she took her first long vacation since taking power to go on a honeymoon with me. It was quite surprising, but I didn't appreciate it much. I had just obtained management power. It was the time to achieve results and establish authority in the group. Throwing away work to vacation now was like taking my life. But I couldn't refuse. Although I said I didn't love Victoria and only discussed interests with her, in action I feigned deep affection. I would steal glances at her with admiring and suppressed eyes. I would secretly follow her on my burner account. I practiced shooting because she liked it. I secretly painted her in the studio. I would secretly note her preferences, pretend I liked them, and have the cook make them for her. I wouldn't restrict any of her social activities, but I would leave a light on for her when she came home late. I wouldn't interfere with her food, clothing, housing, or transportation over her assistant's head, but I wouldn't miss a single festival or anniversary, finding ways to give her gifts, not necessarily catering to her taste, but definitely novel, making her remember it. I would also tolerate her without a bottom line. No matter how dissatisfied I was with her behavior, I smiled and said it didn't matter. But turning around, I would inevitably sulk, waiting for her to coax me with a few words. I did this not because I was love-struck, but because I was sober enough. No wife would truly like a husband who only sought an exchange of interests, especially a woman in a high position like Victoria. Love was easily accessible to her. The less she lacked, the scarcer it was. If she was duplicitous in this path, she could empathize with a duplicitous man. Conquering a willing man is boring. Conquering a man who is tough-mouthed but soft-hearted is also boring. What's interesting is making her unable to guess, making her weigh things in her heart, and also have softness. Only then, when facing interests, would she have a reason to yield to me. After we became intimate, we spent a sweet time together. Victoria had a high demand in this regard. Once she got a taste, she wished she could stick with me every day. Even later, as an old married couple, the interval never exceeded 3 days. Every time she came home from a business trip, the bed would nearly fall apart. She was a descendant of the old school nowhere smelled as good as the bed. Fortunately, she loved to learn and was good at summarizing and improving from practice. The sweetness I tasted was far more than the bitterness I ate. Our bodies were in harmony, and our careers were even more compatible. With Victoria's recommendation, I hired a very powerful trader. Those major shareholders who used to jump around for my third uncle were easily brought under my command in the face of profit. I returned the favor, turning around to charge into those circles, mixing like a fish in water. The little moves Victoria's cousin made behind her back were all traced by me starting from his partner. Gradually, I discovered that besides work and sex, Victoria and I could also have a lot to talk about. In those days when I feigned deep affection, she seemed to be influenced subtly, occasionally returning a little tenderness and sweetness to me. She would care about my emotions, create romance and surprises, trying hard to fulfill a wife's responsibility. Even if she didn't love me, she was at least gentle and thoughtful. And she kept herself clean, didn't like smoking or drinking, didn't lust after men. The circle gradually regarded us as a model wealthy couple. Every time I went out to socialize, I could always garner envious gazes. I was also more at ease at the negotiation table. My heart gradually settled. I even once wanted to let myself develop real feelings. But Mr. Winters couldn't sit still. Mr. Winters started calling us back for dinner frequently. But I was busy, and Victoria was even busier. Often out of 5 invitations, I would only agree to 1. And the chances of Victoria showing up were even lower. If I went back 3 times, bringing her along once was considered good. Mr. Winters was very dissatisfied with this. Everyone outside says your relationship is good. I think it's just so-so. If it were really good, why doesn't she accompany you back? Women saying they're busy is all an excuse. I've been married to your mom for so many years, and she has never not accompanied me because of work. I lowered my head to drink soup. I didn't want to pay attention to him, but hearing the last sentence, I really couldn't hold it back. That's because Mom is lucky. She gets money without working. Whether she accompanies you or not doesn't affect her eating, drinking, and playing. Mr. Winters choked and jumped immediately. Ethan, what do you mean? Do you think your mom is incompetent and only knows how to spend money? I'm telling you, that's your grandfather's bias. He gave positions and shares to the eldest and third born, but specifically blocked your mom. Grandpa was indeed different towards Mom. Of the 3 children, he only set up a trust for her. Even if Montgomery Group collapses, she still gets money. Mr. Winters stopped talking. He couldn't refute. Ms. Montgomery had participated in the group's operations when she was young. Whatever passed through her hands inevitably turned into a huge disaster. No one in the New York elite circle didn't know this. Back then, if the marriage candidates the Montgomery family liked didn't look down on her, Grandpa wouldn't have relented and let her marry Mr. Winters. After failing to get an advantage, Mr. Winters ceased fire for a while. Then he started getting sick frequently. Victoria might not have time to accompany her husband to his parents' home. But if her father-in-law was sick, logic and emotion dictated she had to visit. Especially since the private hospital Mr. Winters checked into was very close to Sterling Group. The director was also Victoria's own aunt. During that time, Jordan paused his performances to accompany him wholeheartedly. Every time Victoria went, the two would meet. Twice, they were even mistaken for a married couple while accompanying Mr. Winters for checkups. After all, except for temperament, Jordan and I looked 70 to 80% alike. It was perfectly normal for outsiders to mistake us. I knew Mr. Winters' intention, but I didn't have time to waste with him. I would only maliciously imagine. If Victoria made a mistake, how would I maximize my benefits? The slap in the face came quickly. The day I returned from a business trip abroad, New York encountered a once-in-a-decade storm. Flights were delayed. Airport roads were flooded. My subordinates and I were trapped in the departure hall for nearly 7 hours. It was just working in a different place usually. I wouldn't care at all. But that day I had a fever of 102 degrees, plus acute gastritis. My emotions were inevitably unstable. During the wait, my subordinates frequently received calls from family and partners. The only call I received was a scam call. Later, my phone ran out of battery and shut down. When I turned it on at home, besides a call from Victoria's assistant, all missed calls were from partners. 99 plus unread personal WeChat messages. Half of the messages were from the family group, the conversation of that family of 3. Victoria also spoke. I checked the time, it was the 5th hour. I was trapped at the airport. She went to visit the sick today and also drove Jordan home. For a moment, emotions of sarcasm, self-mockery, and resentment engulfed me. I even opened the chat box with her, wanting to question her. But I held back. Only when you truly love someone do you get angry over such things. But I was clearly pretending. Victoria arrived home an hour later. I had just showered. Coming out of the bathroom, I heard her voice. "When did you get back?" "Just now. I saw on the news that the airport road was closed." "Yeah. Why didn't you call me?" Because of this sentence, the anger I had just suppressed rushed straight to the top of my head. I almost shouted it out. "Call you for what? Are you the god of thunder? Can you stop the rain? Or clear the road?" Victoria was stunned by my questioning, but her expression softened a bit. "What's wrong? Not feeling well?" She reached out to touch me, but I turned sideways to dodge. "Nothing." I closed my eyes, trying hard to calm my emotions. "Sorry, work didn't go smoothly today." "What is it? Do you need?" "No need." "Ethan."
Victoria Said imperceptibly, somewhat helpless.
"We are husband and wife. You can rely on me when you have difficulties." "Rely on you?" "Ha!" Curved my lips. "Okay." Maybe the sarcasm on my face was too obvious.
Victoria frowned.
"What is exactly wrong with you today?" "Nothing." Victoria's gaze pressed straight onto me. After confirming I wouldn't tell the truth, she finally got angry. "You arrived at 1 p.m. 7 hours at the airport and you never thought to contact me. What were you doing for those 7 hours? Who were you with?" "Working," I said. "Why didn't you call me?" "I did." "You turned off your phone. Ordered your assistant to call?" I nodded to myself, looking like a very understanding husband. "I understand. CEO Sterling is very busy. Visiting your father-in-law, driving your brother-in-law home. Where would you find the time to care about this crap? Airport Road was closed, Genshin Road was also closed. Wasn't it tiring circling the city, CEO Sterling?" As soon as these words came out, the surrounding air froze. I cursed inwardly, wishing I could slap myself. I haven't gotten what I want yet, how could I offend the boss? Just as I was racking my brains on how to elegantly defuse the awkwardness, Victoria spoke. Ethan, are you jealous? How to describe her tone? Surprise, caution, inquiry, and seemingly a little delight. I almost jumped up. Jealous of what? Did you develop feelings for Jordan? Victoria's face sank. Stop talking nonsense. Even if you did, I wouldn't be jealous. Victoria, we are a married couple but a generic corporate merger. No love, only interests. But please remember your promise, CEO Sterling. Guarantee loyalty. After speaking, I turned and entered the master bedroom, slamming the door heavily. Victoria seemed to stand in the living room for a long time. With the sound of a forceful door slam, everything returned to peace. Victoria and I started a Cold War mode. She flew to Germany for half a month and didn't contact me proactively. I didn't ignore her either, until she returned to the country, pestering me to sleep together a few times. She also generously gave me a project. Only then did I start feigning deep affection again. But there was a barrier in my heart after all. The more realistic the acting became, the more perfunctory it was. I didn't care if Victoria was satisfied. I only knew I was getting closer and closer to that position. During this period, Mr. Winters continued his petty moves, using every available opportunity to create chances for the two of them to be alone. Once when Victoria took a late-night flight back, Jordan picked her up. When she ran quickly towards him, her face was full of pleasantly surprised smiles. Before, no matter how deeply I pretended, she had never smiled at me like that. Hidden hatred sprouted in my heart again. I hated differential treatment, and I hated betrayal even more. Besides, this photo was sent to me by Mr. Winters. He said, "Stolen things must be returned sooner or later." When I was hated and treated differently by him as a child, I suffered so much I hid under the covers crying day and night, falling into an emotional vortex unable to extricate myself. I was confused. I couldn't figure out why he hated me so much. He harbored a fluke mind. He thought that since he could marry Ms. Montgomery as an exception, Jordan would also be one. Too bad the plan failed. Grandpa resolutely refused to compromise, declaring that if he dared to make trouble again, he would make Ms. Montgomery divorce and remarry. And the steadfast love he imagined collapsed a month after Ms. Montgomery's supply was cut off. He ended up looking disgraced, becoming the joke of the entire circle. He didn't dare resist Grandpa, so he poured all his hatred onto me. What the hell did this have to do with me? To this day, I still don't understand his brain circuitry. But I won't think about it anymore, because it's not important. As for Jordan, his obsession with Victoria might have some but absolutely couldn't be called love. He held a grudge because I married her. It was the dissatisfaction of finding no better marriage partner than her. From childhood, he was used to snatching my things, used to me yielding to him. Being snatched by me once became an unforgivable sin in his eyes. Even if it breached moral ethics, he didn't need to blame himself, because this was what I owed him. After the talk with Victoria collapsed in the car that day, she used a business trip as an excuse and avoided me for half a month. Even though I made a concession, splitting assets 30-70, she didn't agree. I asked her to propose a plan, only getting a sentence. "We'll talk face to face when I get back." But the return date was uncertain. She wouldn't cooperate, so the divorce matter could only be shelved. After the initial urgency passed, I also looked on the bright side. I just took power. Divorcing now did more harm than good. Might as well take advantage of the title of Victoria's husband to grab more benefits. In case there was blame to take, it would be easy to dump it on Victoria. In a good mood, I was radiant every day. Marcus returned to the country for a vacation and asked me out for drinks. I immediately agreed happily. Compared to Jordan, Marcus and I were more like real brothers. We would chat often, share our thoughts, and meet up for fun whenever we were free. As luck would have it, the place Marcus chose was the influencer bar where Jordan held his party the day he returned. There, I unexpectedly met Victoria. When she came looking for me, I was having a blast playing with a few young, pretty influencer models. Although none of these people compared to Victoria's stunning looks. They won by being young and lively, sweet-mouthed, and providing emotional value. Talking to them didn't require using my brain. True or false, no burden at all. I hadn't been this carefree in a long time. I was holding the hand of the prettiest girl, studying her palm lines, when a hand suddenly cut in front of my eyes. President Montgomery is so amazing, why don't you read mine? I looked up and met Victoria's gloomy face. Can't you see I'm busy? No. Pushed away by me, Victoria didn't get angry. She sat down right next to me, grabbing the pretty girl's hand. I'll read it for you. Guaranteed accurate. In just an instant, the pretty girl's face turned from pink to green, crying out in pain. I quickly slapped Victoria's hand. Don't bully the kid. You treat them as kids, but they don't treat you as an elder. Victoria's gaze swept over the girls, smiling insincerely. If you stay any longer, you'll have bad luck later. The girls looked at each other. A bold one asked, "Who are you?"
Victoria Sterling.
In less than 10 seconds, everyone was gone. Marcus also made an excuse and slipped away. Holding my wine glass, I asked Victoria unhappily, "Satisfied?" "Satisfied with what?" She loosened her cuffs, picked up a glass of wine, and downed it in one go. "Satisfied that my husband is finding a bunch of mediocre women to play with behind my back? Which of them is as beautiful as me? Which has a better body? Which is richer than me?" After speaking, she drank another glass. What terrible taste. Seeing her angry put me in a good mood. I added fuel to the fire. They have sweet mouths. I like that. Whatever you like to hear, I can say too. Oh, this damned competitive spirit. I crooked my finger at her, lips close to her ear. Say you agree to the divorce and you'll leave with nothing. Victoria laughed in anger. Keep dreaming. I won't divorce you. Why? I love you. I can't bear to. This time it was my turn to be choked up. The second Miss Sterling was truly teachable. She could lie without blinking. Neither of us spoke anymore. Inexplicably, we started a drinking contest. Half drunk, the bar owner came over to toast, respectfully calling me brother-in-law. I had heard early on that the owner of this bar was some heiress. I didn't expect it to be the Chun family's third daughter, Chun Wong, a famous bad girl in New York. While everyone else was wasting time, she managed to play creatively. No wonder she could make a dying bar famous. Chun Wong thanked me. If not for your discerning eye back then, I wouldn't be where I am today. I'll drink 3 glasses to show my gratitude. Brother-in-law, you drink as you please. Chun Wong respectfully drank 3 glasses of wine, full of sincerity. I was a bit confused, certain I had absolutely no dealings with her. But seeing Victoria's matter-of-fact look, I accepted it calmly. As soon as the person left, I immediately asked, "What's going on? You invested in this bar?" The Chun family was only a third-rate wealthy family in New York. Chun Wong had a reputation and was marginalized by her family. It was perfectly normal to need partners. It's just, you're close with Chun Wong? This was strange. 2 people who couldn't be further apart, different circles, different temperaments. How did they hook up? Victoria was silent, her expression covered by the colorful neon lights. Unclear. Under the influence of alcohol, I kicked her with my toe. "Speak." Victoria grabbed it, her gaze heavy. "Don't fuss." I lifted the other foot. "I will fuss." Caught by her again. My grandpa said women who don't listen to their husbands will have bad luck. No matter how I pestered, Victoria wouldn't speak. I got anxious, opening my mouth to bite her. But she held the back of my head and kissed down aggressively. Her mouth retained the smell of alcohol, same frequency as mine. Not strong, mellow and clear, making one drown. The moment she pried open my teeth, I subconsciously sucked. Victoria groaned. Her whole body stiffened. Pausing for 2 seconds, she grabbed my waist, pressing me into the sofa for a deep kiss. What happened later was hazy, like a bizarre dream. Getting in the car, getting out, taking the elevator, going home. She kept holding me, kept kissing me. Lying on the soft bed in the master bedroom, I watched her carefully wipe my face, hands, and wash my feet. Although expressionless, Her eyes were extremely gentle, movements skilled and detailed, like treating a rare treasure. About to divorce, yet serving her ex-husband like a beast of burden. Victoria was so angry she didn't talk to me for a long time, until somewhere between dream and wakefulness, she suddenly lifted the quilt and got into bed, hugging me tightly, started kissing me again. Every time during foreplay, Victoria also liked to kiss me. The kisses then were intense, dominant, carrying aggression and purpose. But tonight, she was clearly more focused and gentle. Not just the mouth, brows, eyes, nose, ears were not spared. Clearly aroused, but she never went a step further. Finally, she cupped my face with both hands, kissing while asking for a promise. Don't divorce, okay? Tell me where I did wrong, I'll change. You want to hear sweet words? I can learn. Ethan, promise me, promise me. I was annoyed and slapped her face. Stop it, sleep. Victoria pulled me into her arms, hugging me from behind, asking again. You promised? Promised what? I was dazed. MMH. No taking it back. She hooked my pinky with hers. No lying to me. I'll give you the Tech City project. All the money at home is yours. So noisy. I frowned and shook her off. MMH. Too sleepy. I closed my eyes, letting Victoria hug me tighter. Before falling asleep completely, I felt a warmth on my neck. Instinctively raising my hand, I touched Victoria's face. Ethan. She held my hand in her palm, saying piously, I love you. When I woke up, Victoria was long gone. Her side of the bedding was cold. The warm water on the nightstand was just the right temperature. I had blacked out a bit. My memory of last night remained only in fragmented images. Only that kiss, that I love you, was deep in my memory. But I didn't believe it. How could Victoria love me? Did she learn to feign deep affection too? But why? What good would not divorcing do her? Countless reasons flashed through my mind, and I rejected them one by one. Feeling hungry, I went to the kitchen to find food first. I couldn't cook. There was always a maid at home taking care of food and daily life. But occasionally on holidays, Victoria would cook herself. Like the sandwich I was biting into now, one of her specialties. The first time I ate it, I was amazed, but because it was all vegetarian, I only gave it a 90. Later, whenever Victoria made it, she would add extra meat to my portion. Usually, she would also instruct the maid to make more meat dishes. This was one of the reasons I was willing to live with her. No matter how different our living habits were, she never tried to change me. Even without love, she gave enough respect and tolerance. If it didn't involve Jordan, if it were anyone else, maybe I really wouldn't mind. The thought flashed by and I rejected it. It's not like she's the only woman in the world. She was in a high position and I stood at the peak too. Why should I wrong myself? After breakfast, I called my assistant to assign work. Before hanging up, I suddenly felt a hunch and asked, check who the shareholders of the Lost Alley bar are. The assistant was silent. I found it strange. What's wrong? Assistant. Lost Alley was a gift from CEO Sterling to you. Did I have amnesia? I asked. Why do I have absolutely no impression? When Lost Alley opened last year, CEO Sterling sent you an invitation. You were in a meeting at the time. Mr. Winters happened to come over and took the invitation. You said let him be, so I didn't interfere. I only found out later that the equity agreement for the bar was clipped inside the invitation. Once the assistant mentioned it, I remembered there was such a thing. As president of Sterling Group, Victoria naturally received more invitations than I did. There were many events where I needed to use the title of Victoria's husband to participate. Most of the time she would accompany me. When it wasn't convenient, she would have someone send me an invitation. Mostly industry summits, celebrity banquets, occasionally some art exhibitions or concerts. I chose myself whether to go or not. The bar opening was the one and only time. I thought it was strange at the time, but my mind was distracted by Mr. Winters, so I didn't look into it deeply. I asked, how did you know there was an equity agreement in the invitation? Assistant. The night the bar opened, the chief assistant called me asking if you gave the invitation to young Master Jordan. I couldn't say Mr. Winters took it without permission, so I had to bite the bullet and explain you had official business to deal with and couldn't get away. Master Jordan wanted to go, so you gave it to him. The chief assistant asked again if you liked the gift. My brain was waterlogged at the time, asking what gift? The chief assistant reminded me the equity agreement was inside. Before he finished speaking, the phone was snatched by CEO Sterling. She seemed very angry, said since you didn't care, you didn't need to know, and hung up directly. Seeing the situation was serious, I quickly called you. I just started speaking when you told me to shut up and said never to reveal your schedule to CEO Sterling in the future. Listening to the assistant's explanation, I had mixed feelings for a moment. When Mr. Winters took the invitation, I guessed he wanted to cause trouble. But I thought it wouldn't hurt much. Lost Alley spent a lot of money on marketing before opening. The gimmick was strong. Victoria liked quiet and almost never set foot in such places. Sending me an invitation was probably because I mentioned to her that if I didn't consider reality, my dream was to run a bar. It was a small favor she thought I would like. At the time, my mind was full of waiting for Mr. Winters' plan to fail. But I didn't expect Victoria not only went that night but met Jordan and chatted happily. Even worse, when leaving, she was photographed by reporters letting Jordan into her car. It was entirely thanks to Sterling Group's PR department being sharp that the scandal was killed in the cradle. I knew Victoria didn't betray me, but I was angry she didn't give me a single explanation afterward. We even had a Cold War for a long time because of this. I thought she didn't care about my coldness, indifferent to treating me coldly. I didn't know there was such an interlude. Looking at the opening date of Lost Alley again, it turned out to be the day we decided to get married. 3 years into the marriage, I remembered all holidays and anniversaries, but completely forgot this day. My heartbeat couldn't stop accelerating. Fine sweat seeped from my forehead and back. I couldn't help thinking, if I hadn't let Mr. Winters take the invitation, if I had gone, would Victoria and I not have reached this situation today? I seemed to keep making the same mistake. I used Victoria as a stepping stone for promotion, treated her as a pawn to counter Mr. Winters. Even when feigning deep affection, I didn't treat her as a wife. My catering to her preferences was so she couldn't pick out mistakes. But her catering to my preferences was genuinely wanting to make me happy physically and mentally. So I could let her be schemed against again and again. So she could choose to forgive me again and again. When I treated the celebration party as the last chance for Victoria, secretly calculating that if she could choose me firmly and without hesitation, I would continue playing the model couple with her. Did Victoria also imagine the same? If I could put down my disguise and treat her sincerely, could she run towards me more boldly? When Victoria came home, the night was deep. Seeing me sitting on the sofa, she came over and asked, "Waiting for me? Victoria, let's talk." This time, she didn't escape. Sitting opposite me, she smiled slightly. "Still want a divorce?" I asked back, "You don't want to?" From the moment I decided to marry, I never thought of separating from you. Pursed my lips. If considering only interests, divorce does more harm than good to me. So you proposing divorce was out of emotion? Victoria looked at me, her voice gloomy. Besides me, do you have a woman you like more? I was stunned, speaking the truth. No. In that case, let me state my thoughts first. Okay. Point 1, I was serious when I said I love you. Because I love you, I don't want to separate from you. Is point 1 this direct? My face exploded red instantly. Victoria bent her finger and scraped the tip of my nose. So you do know how to be shy. Glared at her, and she immediately sat up straight, taking the opportunity to hold both my hands. I thought a lot these days about the reasons prompting you to propose divorce. Whether out of emotion or interest, ultimately it's because I didn't do well enough. I never told you I loved you, nor did I make you believe I loved you through actions. Even because of some unfortunate coincidences, I made you misunderstand. These are all my faults. I asked, knowing it was a misunderstanding, why didn't you explain at the time? I was too confident before, thinking you could understand. Like what? That time you were trapped at the airport, I did call you, but couldn't get through. Before getting ready to pick you up, I heard your father and brother say your business trip this time was to negotiate cooperation with an ex-girlfriend. I was angry you didn't tell me, so I went to the company to work overtime out of spite. Victoria paused here, her face extremely unnatural. Under my forcing gaze, she continued. I stayed at the company for 2 hours and didn't get a single thing done. I asked my assistant to contact you, but you had already turned off your phone. Your assistant's phone couldn't get through either. I didn't delay anymore and drove directly to the airport. I waited for 4 hours before the airport road reopened, but I saw you get into a woman's car. I recognized that person. She chased you before you were married. No, I caught the key point. How do you know who chased me? Victoria wouldn't say. I had to let it go. What else? Once at the airport, and the time lost alley opened, I mistook Jordan for you and initiated conversation. Once I realized it wasn't you, I kept my distance. I did ask the driver to take him home, but I wasn't in the car. I thought since I act with integrity, I didn't need to prove my innocence. Little did I know, calculating people count exactly on that. Victoria's words were sincere. I believed she had no need to lie to me. Just one thing. Why did you go to the airport on the day of the celebration party? To pick someone up. Who? Ms. Daniels. My eyes went wide. Ms. Daniels was invited by you? Montgomery Group had always intended to cooperate with How Company, the global smart home giant. I contacted Ms. Daniels' assistant many times but couldn't book a meeting. Victoria actually invited the person directly to the country. No wonder Ms. Daniels' assistant contacted me proactively the day after the celebration party. How did you do it? When studying abroad, I had some personal friendship with Ms. Daniels. Why didn't you say so at the time? I didn't want you to have a burden. You worked hard for so long. Even without my participation, you would have succeeded anyway. Victoria looked relaxed, but her tone was sincere and solemn. It was my selfishness acting up. I wanted to advance your happiness, so I took the initiative. Just this one sentence, and fog suddenly rose in my eyes, unbearably stinging. Ethan. Victoria pulled me into her arms, whispering gently and lingeringly in my ear. I don't love you because you are perfect. Your flaws are equally cute in my eyes. Regardless of whether you will fall in love with me as I love you in the future, I will only love you. I couldn't help crying. I always said I didn't care about my parents' bias. In reality, when I sought pleasure in confronting Mr. Winters time and again, I was trapped in a demon of unwillingness and indignation. When I truly let go, I not only had no weaknesses but also no armor. After completely ignoring Mr. Winters and the other two, my life became extraordinarily wonderful. All time outside work, I stuck with Victoria. We dated like a normal couple, eating, chatting, watching movies, doing the happiest things together. I took off my disguise, she abandoned her stiffness. We blended like milk and water, inseparable. Before, we never chatted idly on text. At most, I would routinely pretend to be virtuous and care about her. She would respond perfunctorily with 2 sentences. Now, she always had countless funny things to share with me. The coffee brewed by the secretary that didn't suit her taste, the fountain pen she used for years, her lunch menu. Or after rain, seeing a rainbow while sitting by the floor-to-ceiling window. She said, "Ethan, I miss you so much," but we clearly just saw each other in the morning. If it were before, I would definitely disdain dealing with such trivialities. Would definitely mock her mushiness. Now not only did I enjoy it, but I was also happy to feed back all my emotions. Even if working overtime, we had to go home together. Of the 2 studies at home, only one would have the light on. When she had video conferences, she had to free up a hand to hold mine. Clingy? So clingy. But I liked it so much. Without me as a background board, the warmth index between Mr. Winters' couple and Jordan dropped in a straight line. Jordan had his position as principal dancer taken by a colleague and cried bitterly at home. Mr. Winters not only didn't comfort him but blamed him for being less skilled and embarrassing him. You look exactly like Ethan. He can tie down Victoria, why can't you? Old money families look down on you, new money families you can't marry into. You can't even keep the principal position. What use are you? I spent half my life's effort on you. How can you not compare to Ethan? Amidst Mr. Winters' vicious scolding, Jordan collapsed, smashing things at home while cursing. Is it because of me that I can't compare to Ethan? It's because my last name is Winters. With a broken down family like your Winters family, what the hell were you fighting for naming rights for? If not for you, I would have Montgomery shares, annual dividends, and live a wealthy and peaceful life like Mom. No, if my last name was Montgomery, Grandpa would have nurtured me. Everything Ethan has today would be mine. Mine. According to the servants, Jordan's mental state went wrong after that day. Either silent or shouting and screaming. Hearing this, I only felt it was ironic. Jordan might have forgotten, but I remembered. Mr. Winters was born into a middle-class family. His grandparents poured everything into supporting and nurturing him, all thinking and wishing for him to climb high branches and cross classes. They got their wish, and so did he. But the disparity in background and his dependence on women in his bones made his wealthy life difficult. He could only prove his status by making demands again and again. He pretended to take me out to play, drugged me, and sent Jordan back to the Montgomery house. Grandpa's health was already bad then. Although he spotted clues, he didn't look into it deeply. If Jordan hadn't been unable to endure the hardship of studying and called crying to go back, his plan would have succeeded. I didn't sympathize with Jordan. Ending up in this situation was due to Mr. Winters' failure to teach, and also his own doing. Mr. Winters started looking for me frequently, but I didn't see him once. I didn't care what he wanted to do, repent or atone. I wouldn't give him a chance. The rest of my life is long. My time will only be saved for worthy people and things.
Epilogue, Victoria.
The first time I saw Ethan was in my senior year of high school. He was a sophomore. There was a music room in the school that was perennially empty because of ghost rumors. I didn't believe it. I would go stay there a while when I wanted to be alone. Unexpectedly, he wasn't afraid either. I went to zone out, he went to curse people. The boy, looking cold and aloof, had a mouth sharp enough to do stand-up comedy. Extremely interesting. I listened for free for half a year and really wanted to say hi to him. But many times when we passed each other, he kept a cold face. Pickup lines lingered on the tip of my tongue, but I just couldn't speak them. To maintain my image, I could only pretend he was air. After graduation, I studied abroad and gradually forgot about this. Unexpectedly, 2 years later, in a foreign country, I met him again. He looked much more mature, boarding with the professor couple next door to me. We rarely met. I was busy starting a business, he seemed to be too. But our two houses were connected by a terrace. As long as we were both home, I could always see him. He would hide there smoking and making phone calls. I didn't smoke, nor did I like people who smoked. But the way he smoked was lazy and lonely, making me feel he was cool. He stopped cursing people, changing to sarcasm. His mouth was still as sharp. But every time he hung up the phone, he seemed unhappy. Once he even cried and shouted at the phone, "If you don't love me, why did you give birth to me?" I don't know what was said on the other end. He smashed the phone and cried uncontrollably. I really wanted to comfort him, but by then the Sterling family had selected me as the heir. My future was destined for a marriage alliance. Since there was no result, I couldn't selfishly intervene in his karma. Fortunately, he soon had a girlfriend. They seemed very sweet together. I moved away soon after. Out of sight, out of mind. After officially taking charge of Sterling Group, all my energy was used on work. I didn't think of him again, nor did I have feelings for anyone. My family intended to ally with the Montgomery family. I was indifferent, but Marcus found me privately, saying he was unwilling. I cooperated with him to ruin the blind date. But soon, my aunt told me the Montgomery family switched the candidate to the second young master, Ethan. I went to the blind date banquet as agreed. I waited for Jordan at the tea house for nearly an hour before he arrived late. Based on this point alone, I decided to terminate the blind date. But when I saw Jordan walking over, my heart beat so fast it almost jumped out of my chest. It was actually him. How could it be him? But I wouldn't mistake him. It really was him. I thought he must have encountered an unavoidable emergency to be late. It's okay, I'd listened to his explanation. Unfortunately, he wasn't him. Under the similar skin lay a completely different soul. Jordan was still chattering endlessly. I didn't want to hear a single word. Just as I wanted to find an excuse to leave, my heart moved suddenly. I asked him, "Do you have brothers?" Jordan froze, hesitating. "I have an older brother, but we aren't close. His personality is weird, bad temper, likes to curse people. Mom and Dad don't like him. Sent him abroad very early." Jordan went on and on. I gave a cold glance, and only then did he shut up. I sneered in my heart. "You care if they like him? As long as I like him, that's enough." Knowing the Montgomery family switched people privately, my aunt was so angry she wanted to go argue immediately. I stopped her. If this matter blew up, Ethan would also be embarrassed. So we only politely notified the Montgomery family it wasn't suitable. But I didn't expect this move would make Mr. Winters and his son push their luck. They actually wildly imagined using rumors to build momentum. I planned to find Ethan personally to explain this matter. Unexpectedly, he set a trap first and snatched the project I was determined to get. I went to negotiate with him. He actively proposed marriage, the reason being he liked me. Naturally, I didn't believe it, yet I still agreed to him. The only condition was loyalty. After marriage, we got along very happily. Career and life went smoothly. He was tough-mouthed but soft-hearted, never mentioning love, yet doing everything a husband should do thoughtfully. Detailed to the point where I couldn't pick out faults. He could list evidence of loving me from 1 to 10. But I knew in my heart, he was feigning deep affection. I had seen what he looked like when he truly loved someone. It wasn't like this. But I didn't blame him. I believed one day I could move him. I originally thought Ms. Montgomery and her husband were just biased. But I didn't expect Mr. Winters to disregard even human ethics. Those few chance encounters I had with Jordan were all designed by him. Jordan even deliberately dressed up as Ethan. They were twins looking 80% alike, plus deliberate disguise. At first glance, it was hard not to mistake them. I still remember the excitement when I walked out of the cabin that day, thinking it was Ethan coming to pick me up. Ethan's feigned deep affection had a huge characteristic. He would only pretend conveniently. Spending money, spending thought. Things that required him to suffer personally, he would absolutely not do. If he did it, it must be sincere. He would never know what excitement and joy I held when running towards him at that moment. When I was most disappointed in Ethan, I also thought about divorce. I could tolerate him not loving me, accept his utilization. But I couldn't stand his distrust of me, even treating me as a pawn to counter Mr. Winters. He knew clearly what hearts that father and son harbored, yet let it be time and again. Seemed not to care at all that I might make a mistake. Completely unconcerned that the situation might spiral out of control beyond retrieval. But that time we had a Cold War. I sneaked home in the middle of the night. I found sleeping pills on his nightstand. Even in his sleep, he was crying. He secretly wrote on the back of our wedding photo, "Victoria, I'm sorry." I suddenly wanted to throw caution to the wind. I was willing to enter the game myself to help him get his wish. Ethan said his wish was only the position of Montgomery Group president, because he coveted wealth and power, seeking only profit. But actually, the partiality he couldn't get was his demon. He needed to constantly feign meanness, finding the pleasure of being valued from confrontations with Mr. Winters time and again. He needed the firmness of the person he cared about choosing him firmly when facing a choice between two, to make up for the pain of being abandoned again and again. My consideration for not directly handling that father and son was also this. The one who tied the bell must untie it. To truly walk out of the shackles, one must personally resolve the person giving the shackles. The moment Ethan proposed divorce, while pained, I also breathed a sigh of relief. His feelings for me were finally not just a chess player looking at a chess piece. With love and desire, there comes hate and jealousy. But standing outside the hotel suite door, I was afraid again. I was afraid my weight to him was too light, that he wouldn't leave me any room. Even more afraid of being too clever and ending up with a blunder, making him fall into a more paranoid emotional maze. Then let me add more fuel. Jordan being removed as principal, expelled from the dance troupe, were all my instructions. Ms. Montgomery's illegitimate daughter being exposed, expelled jointly by the Montgomery family, was also my handiwork. Mr. Winter's ending would only be more miserable than theirs. Although Ethan had completely let go, villains must receive their due punishment. Of course, I won't tell him that he was once a beautiful dream that ran through my entire youth.